Thanks for joining me. The term multinational is often used as a pejorative, a shorthand way of conveying the impression of a big, unfeeling corporation unburdened by any sense of national pride or responsibility. At times, such an image is inappropriate, even unfair. Not tonight. The multinationals featured in Tony Jones' report have behaved with wanton disregard for the consequences of their actions. In the mid-70s, the world was shocked by the revelation that tiny babies were dying like flies in Africa simply because they'd been weaned from their mother's life-giving milk onto artificial formula, hopelessly unsuited to their primitive environment. The aggressive marketing behind this fatal change of lifestyle was an international scandal. 15 years later, all that's changed is that the market is wider. Incidentally, Four Corners is not suggesting that the Australian subsidiaries of the multinational corporations featured in Tony Jones' report are involved in the allegations of impropriety raised in this program.
It's September 1989, and this is the diarrhoea ward of the National Institute of Child Health in Karachi. You may find this scene as distressing as we did filming it, but it's a common event in this hospital. This little girl was badly malnourished and then dehydrated after several bouts of diarrhoea. She was so sick that when other complications set in, there was little chance of saving her. But even with the death of a child, the doctors scarcely raise an eyebrow. There are wards like this in every hospital we saw in Karachi. The cases are tragically similar, and the pattern is being repeated around the country. As we walked through these wards, we began to feel as though we'd stumbled across some hidden well of suffering. These are the places where children come to die. We were to see such faces many times in hospitals and clinics in Pakistan. Then in the Philippines, we found the same story, the same faces. Too often they seem to be floating perilously close to death. Severe malnutrition had left many looking like old men and women. But as we talked to doctors and mothers, we began to understand how many of these children had ended up like this. I'm sure that most of us have seen babies in this sort of condition before, in pictures from the third world. Maybe some of us have even become used to seeing this sort of picture. And I can tell you, when you get up close to it, it's not very easy at all to be used to this. This pathetic little person, her name is Marilyn. She's suffering from third-degree malnutrition. She's got amoebic dysentery. She's only 3 months old. You might expect that she comes from an area where there's been a plague or a famine. But she hasn't. She's been bottle fed. That's why she's like this. She's been bottle fed on infant milk formulas from birth. And these formulas are still being shamelessly peddled in this country by 5 international corporations. This baby here is a Nestlé baby. If you think you've heard all this before, you're probably right. In the mid-1970s, international attention focused on Africa, where a clear link was proven between the bottle feeding of formula milks and high infant mortality rates. Nestlé, now the world's largest food corporation, came under attack for its formula milk marketing in the Third World. Despite international indignation and a boycott of Nestlé products that spread to 10 countries, the formula milk trade continued to expand. So in 1981, the World Health Organization introduced a global marketing code to curb the corporate excesses. The code demands that companies stop their practice of giving free samples or supplies of formula to mothers or institutions. It prohibits promotion of the products in hospitals and the giving of personal gifts to health workers. The code bans media advertising of infant formulas and the use of logos depicting healthy babies on the actual tins. And it insists that labels contain a statement about the superiority of breastfeeding and the hazards of bottle feeding. 118 countries were signatories to the code, including Pakistan, and it seemed there'd been a great victory for the proponents of breastfeeding. But for 8 years, most of the companies have either subverted the code or ignored it altogether. This is particularly obvious in countries like Pakistan, which have failed to enforce it as law. The population here is growing so fast that the potential market for formula milk is staggering. There are 110 million people living here now, and that's expected to double in the next 30 years. Five million babies are born in Pakistan each year, and there are some 40 different milk formulas on the local market. Women who can ill afford the expense are buying the formulas in spite of the overwhelming evidence that breastfeeding is clean, free, and will pass on natural immunities to their babies.
Even in the last 20 years that I have been associated with this unit, I have seen that the breastfeeding has declined in Karachi so fast. This city, the breastfeeding was so very common because traditionally and religiously we are given to the breastfeeding. And it is in this traditional society that the breastfeeding is now declining.
It's being said that Pakistan is now facing the sort of situation which was appearing in Africa some 10 or 15 years ago. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I think so. I think so. Definitely, yes. And unless and until the battle is waged against the bottle feeding and artificial feeding, we may have even worse times than this.
Worse than Africa?
Worse than Africa even.
Yet though Professor Biloo is one of Pakistan's leading paediatricians, he seems incapable of controlling code abuses in his own hospital. Premature babies are fed exclusively on donated formula milks in a ward full of milk company mementos like clocks and notepads. Across the hallway in a ward for malnourished children, a sickly newborn was being bottle-fed by her aunt. Free samples of formula were still being handed out in these same wards.
You can see that I have such strong views, and yet you could go around some of the places in my own department and see even the photographs and the tins lying.
It's extraordinary. Why do you let it happen?
Yeah. You see, if you spend a lot of time and efforts on this, you have to neglect so many other important aspects.
At the moment in Pakistan, the vacuum between words and deeds is being filled by the formula milk companies. There are 13 international corporations represented. Nestlé, as usual, has a big share. But there are also British, French, West German, Dutch and US companies. Some pay lip service to the code, while others appear to ignore it completely. The market leader is a Japanese company called Meiji, which, like its compatriot competitor Snow, avoids the code's advertising restrictions by planting billboards promoting so-called follow-up formulas for older children. None of the companies we approached would agree to be interviewed, except the director of one of the Japanese operations, and that on the proviso that we name neither him nor his company.
The way we are marketing is quite ethical, because we go directly to the doctors or to the prescribers, who then in turn recommend to the mothers that they should use our formula or any other formula which is suitable for their babies.
When you say you go directly to the doctors, what do you mean by that? Do you visit them in hospitals?
Yes, we have a team of representatives, medical representatives, who go and visit the doctors and tell them about the product, their ingredients, their advantages, and under what conditions they can be, recommended.
And do they also give free supplies for the doctors to hand out?
By free supplies, you mean samples?
Samples.
Yes, but we don't encourage giving samples in large quantities.
They are using the print media. They are using their doctors. They are using their forums. They are using conferences. They are promoting the medical professionals in national and international conferences. They are promoting their stalls and exhibitions. They are trampling upon the maternity homes. They are using the cinema tickets for the advertisements. I mean, you think of it and they are doing it.
If there is a conference of the Pediatric Society, then we do go and attend that. So we can also learn something out of that, and we can also just tell the doctors that this product is available.
Do the companies also sponsor some of these symposiums?
Yes, sometimes.
And what form would that take?
Well, it depends. That sometimes maybe we have to arrange some gift, or sometimes we have to sponsor any of the lunch or dinners. It happens all over the world, so there's nothing unusual which is happening in Pakistan.
So what, doctors are given gifts, do you say?
Yes, sometimes.
The seduction of doctors and health workers in these ways is, as we were to find, perhaps the most insidious of the strategies being adopted internationally by many of the companies as a more discreet way of breaking the milk code. The consequences of their corporate activities were all too easy to find. This 4-month-old baby is here with chronic diarrhea and septicemia. He's been raised exclusively on infant formula for all but the first 7 days of his life. In hospital, his grandmother feeds him with a cup and spoon, but on the new brand provided here from free samples. She believes that his mother's milk did not suit him. And in spite of his obvious illness, they continued with formulas. Rizwan, can you ask her, has she seen the advertising hoardings and television advertisements?
आपने क्या इश्तहारात देखे हैं डिब्बे के दूध के?
हाँ 70 रुपये का डब्बा है।
अच्छा, उससे आपको कोई अच्छा असर मिलता है
हाँ
इश्तहारात?
वो सुबह अच्छा असर है।
The lady says that she has seen advertising and has been affected by that, and says that she considers infant formula to be good.
She thinks infant formula is good because of the advertising?
क्या आप इश्तहारात की वजह से समझती हैं?
नहीं नहीं डब्बे ही अच्छा है 70 रुपये दूध अच्छा है।
She says that because it's expensive, rupees 70 for a tin, and has also been advertised, it must be good.
And this baby girl was so severely dehydrated from diarrhea that she was put on an intravenous drip. Her problems appear to be chronic, and again they started from the beginning of her life.
शुरू किया था?
और डॉक्टर दिए थे लियाकत में पैदा हुई थी
अच्छा.
लियाकत अस्पताल में पैदा हुई थी तो वही डॉक्टर
The baby was born in a private hospital where the doctor gave the mother infant formula.
पैदा हुई उसी रोज दे दिए मोरिनागा.
The milk Morinaga was given the same day the baby was born by the doctor.
The same day.
Yeah.
She wasn't encouraged to breastfeed at all.
अच्छा, इसकी माँ को कभी डॉक्टर ने ये नहीं कहा था कि इसको अपना दूध पिलाओ?
हाँ बोला
अच्छा.
बहुत कमजोर है बेटा
अच्छा.
उसमें ताकत नहीं है.
According to the lady, the mother was told to breastfeed, but she says, the grandmother says that her daughter is very weak. So the doctor also gave the formula milk.
And how old is the baby now?
क्या उम्र है बच्चे की?
2 महीने.
2 months old.
In 2 months it's been severely dehydrated 3 times, and it's been on formula milk the whole time.
3 महीने में ये बहुत दफ़ा इसको दस्त है. अच्छा, और 3 दफ़ा यहाँ पे आई है.
हाँ.
In the last 2 months, the baby has diarrhea several times and has been in this hospital admitted on 3 occasions.
आजा प्यारी नींदिया आजा चोरी चोरी सोए मेरी लाडली मैं देती जाऊं लोरी दूध पी लो.
A week later, when she was discharged from hospital, we visited this baby, Nazish, at her home.
क्या हुआ किसने मारा?
We found that Nazish's mother, although she was still breastfeeding the baby's twin, had not been advised to take the chronically ill child off the formula milk. In fact, she was told quite the opposite. So in this overcrowded single room where they were living, Nazish was beginning again the same cycle that's already landed her in hospital 3 times. Now that Nazish is back home, what is she going to feed her?
नाजिश अब घर आ गई तो उसको कौन सा दूध दीजिएगा आप?
P7 ही दूंगी.
She says P7A Snow brand.
That's another one of the formulas.
Yeah.
And what has the baby been fed up till now?
अब तक उसको कौन सा डिब्बा दिया था?
अब तक तो मोरिनागा दिया.
निकाल के लाएं. अच्छा.
There's a Morinaga. It's another one of the Japanese brands.
Yeah.
So she thinks if she changes to another formula, then that will be all right. And that's
Yeah.
in fact what the doctors have told her.
Yeah. She believes that since P7A suited the baby at the hospital where she was, so now she will put the baby on P7A Snow.
It was on the advice of different doctors that their thinly stocked larder was replete with a variety of infant milks. While we were still talking, Nazish's mother sent her niece with a note from the doctor to buy the new formula. It's true the can includes instructions for the proper preparation of the milk. But here in the urban slums of Karachi, where most of the city's more than 10 million people live virtually on top of one another, the instructions on a formula milk tin become a parody of themselves. They call for the water to be boiled, the bottle to be sterilised. But in areas like this, human and industrial wastes mingle in open drains and spill into the streets. Water, a scarce resource, must be bought from tankers, and even then it's not fit to drink. The fuel for boiling that water is limited. Only a tiny minority of the people here can actually read, and for many who do, words like bacteria and virus are not understood anyway. This is the real marketplace of the multinational milk company. These conditions, and worse, are what most children are born into. but they're being born at an unprecedented rate, and the milk market is growing along with it.
Prescribing in artificial feeding or a bottle feeding in a country like this is literally prescribing a death certificate. Because as you know that not more than 7% of our rural women have illiteracy. That leaves more than 90% of the women who have no literacy. And you've already seen the living conditions. You've already seen the chances of infection. Given all these conditions, if the baby is put on the bottle, then the baby is going to get contaminated mixture of bacteria, water and milk. Diluted milk, contaminated with bacteria.
Now, Professor Billu, who we spoke to, describes infant milk formulas as a prescription for death. Now, that's a fairly strong statement. How does that make you feel?
Excuse me, can you repeat that?
He describes it as a prescription for death, that it kills babies.
I see. Well, I don't know why he said that. He might have his own opinion of judging the marketing or the infant formulas.
Well, he said that some 250 to 300,000 children die of diarrheal diseases here in Pakistan. And he said that of those, at least half of them take infant formulas. That's an enormous number of babies to be dying.
As I said before, that it's not the infant formulas which has to be blamed only. It's the feed-making procedure. When the utensils are not cleaned properly, then they are infected by the bacteria and other germs. So if the mother happens to use the same bottle for giving feeds to the baby 2-3 times, or maybe for a couple of days without cleaning it, then it will result definitely in the death of the child.
In Pakistan, the sophistication of the multinational milk companies has way overreached that of their customers. To defend their own marketing practices, the companies resort to the argument that really the mothers are to blame, that they're killing off their own babies by not following instructions. It's remarkable how little has changed since 1978, when Senator Edward Kennedy, heading a US Senate investigation into the bottle feeding controversy, attacked Nestlé.
Would you agree with me that your product should not be used where there is impure water? Yes or no?
We give all the instructions.
Just answer. What is your position?
Of course not, but we cannot cope with that.
Well, as I understand what you say is where there's impure water, it should not be used.
Yes.
Where the people are so poor that they're not going to realistically be able to continue to purchase that, and which is going to mean that they're going to dilute it to a point which is going to endanger the health, that it should not be used.
Yes.
All right, now, then my final question is what do you do, or what do you feel is your corporate responsibility to find out the extent of the use of your product in those circumstances in the developing part of the world? Do you feel that you have any responsibility?
We can't have that responsibility, sir. May I make a reference to...
You can't have that responsibility?
No.
Now, more than 10 years later, this is the face of a Nestlé baby struggling for his life in Manila, capital of the Philippines. If this were the aftermath of some terrible industrial accident, the companies responsible would be paying the costs. But as it's simply the result of an international marketing exercise, it goes on unabated. Here in the Philippines, we had expected to find a different story. This, after all, is the country with the strongest sanctions against the milk companies. In 1986, the newly formed Aquino government enacted as law their own national milk code, based on the advice of the World Health Organization. There are even criminal charges attached to serious violations, but many of the companies have responded by simply becoming more devious. This woman was a long-time medical representative for Nestlé. She asked for anonymity as she fears reprisals for speaking out.
There are a lot of loopholes on the code. So the strategy now is to get to follow the milk code, and then you can go around the bush and you can be just like other Filipinos say, lusot.
What does that mean?
You pass without you can do it without being caught.
One of those secret ways involves Nestlé representatives delivering milk formulas to hospitals, giving an invoice, but never seeking payment. It's a practice Nestlé denies.
After delivering, if they are going to pay, they may pay it, but if they don't have money, then it's all okay with us.
And do many of the hospitals not pay?
Majority of them don't pay. But there are some who pay.
So this is a way of giving free samples to the
Yes.
hospitals?
Just to enter the nursery on your infant formula, this is the way to go on.
As in Pakistan, the casualties of this marketing strategy are easy to find in the diarrhea wards of most hospitals. This baby looks very malnourished. Can you tell us, is this in fact first, second, third degree malnourishment?
This is more of almost a third-degree malnourished infant.
What sort of formula milk has it been having?
The infant was given bottle-fed. The infant was given the milk formula of Nestogen. And this Nestogen, this is a Nestlé product, and this was alternated with breast milk. However, most of the time, bottle feeding was given since the other infant has to be breastfed too.
How sick is this baby? It looks terribly ill to me.
Yes, aside from the diarrhea, the baby is compounded with an upper respiratory infection, which is why this is having fever.
Did Nestlé have a training system to teach people how to relate to
Yes,
doctors?
of course. We do a lot of training, including the closing or the opening dialogue with the doctor.
So what you say to the doctors, that's set down in advance?
Yes, before it used to be like a canned dialogue, even down to some itchy-bitchy talk.
How do you go about establishing a personal relationship or friendship with the doctors?
Well, just like in my case, if you have an area for so long time ago, you would know the likes and dislikes of the doctors you're contacting.
What's wrong with this little one?
This is a 2-month-old infant baby who was admitted here because of acute onset of diarrhea of 2 days duration. Now, this baby is an adopted child. This was previously bottle-fed with condensed milk for 23 days. After the 23rd day, the foster mother shifted the milk formula to an infant formula. This is
So the baby has been fed almost from birth on infant formulas
Yes, that's right.
and condensed milk.
condensed milk. This is a poor quality milk formula, which is more of your sugar, and there's not much of nutritional value.
This particular baby has almost the look about him of an old man.
Yes. The features of a marasmic baby usually have this old man fussy look. There is a deepening of the eyes, and there is the loose skin.
He's virtually skin and bone. There's no fat on him at all.
Yes.
And did you take down the special anniversaries for the doctors?
Yes, of course, these are the dates which you really have to remember. Birthdays, anniversaries, even when other members of the families die, we really have to buy some mascards or flowers to be brought to the contact. We do a lot of escort services to doctors, especially those who are coming from the provinces.
So you're saying that pretty soon you'd find that the doctor would become, if you like, as it's been called, a Nestle doctor.
Yes, yes.
And promote your products.
Yes, to prescribe, really.
Was this sort of business, this giving of gifts and so on, direct marketing strategy that the
Yes,
company had
that's
invented?
included in the marketing strategy. We should know the in and out of the doctor, even the family, even to the last baby that they have. We really have to know the details of the doctors or the contacts that we are contacting every day.
So you're saying you've got a card on each doctor which
Yes.
talks about his likes, his dislikes?
Even the birthdays, the anniversaries, it's all included in that card.
And that would be just passed on to the next representative?
If ever you'll be transferred to an area or you'll be promoted, somebody would take over. So she knows already what the background of the doctor is.
In the mid-1970s, this Filipino doctor began a one-woman campaign for a return to breastfeeding and against the formula milk companies.
Parang hinihimas mo lang yung ulo niya.
She's Dr. Natividad Clavano, and her transformation of the Baguio General Hospital and her detailed studies of the results have made her one of the world's leading experts on breastfeeding. But up until 1975, Dr. Clavano says even she was doing all the wrong things.
I didn't know that, I was doing injustice to these babies and their mothers.
And what was the infant mortality rate here at the time?
It was high. We had a lot of diarrheas, a lot of sepsis, a lot of infection. And I tried my very best to keep the nursery as clean as possible. I could be very strict. No visitors, no nothing. But still, the infection was there.
And since you've stopped bottle feeding, stopped the milk companies coming here, what's happened?
Oh my God. You could see as if all the babies were immunized. I stopped the milk companies from giving us any sample. That was way back in 1975. No sampling, no bottle feeding.
Since you started your programs here, what sort of changes did you see when you saw before many babies dying? What happened now?
Oh, babies survived. I could see that before those babies that could die because of the use of formula and bottle feeding now survives. The small babies now that are being delivered in this hospital survived. And you know what? Our diarrhea stopped. We didn't have any diarrheas from then.
The actual figures were startling. There were 10,000 babies surveyed. Among those exclusively breastfed, the mortality rate dropped by 95%. It's a tribute, says Clavano, to the natural properties of breast milk.
The breast milk is like a reservoir of protection for the baby. If there is an infection circulating around and the mother gets it, or the baby, the mother automatically produces antibodies directly to attack that bacteria or viruses that the mother or the baby has. So it's like almost a miracle that the mother's breast milk has that particular antibodies. In breast milk, you have a living cells that protect the baby. You don't have that in a canned milk.
On an average day as a medical representative for Nestle, how many hospitals, how many doctors would you have visited?
Well, actually, we have a schedule for a month. But then the average contact for a doctor would be 17 is the good enough call or quality call, we would say. But then it depends on what class of a doctor you should be contacting. If it is an A contact, it's a very, very few call, but a quality call.
So the doctors are actually classed
Yes.
by whether they're...
Accordingly. If you are a pediatrician and then your average patients a day is 50 to 100, you're classified A, especially if you're a teaching pediatrician.
And I presume from that an A-class doctor would be worth a lot more to the company.
Yes.
How competitive is the business?
Very, very competitive. Especially these days, there are a lot of milk companies booming around, no?
In the urban slums of cities like Manila, you find the fastest growing market for formula milks. It's in areas like this that Bunso, a grassroots organisation promoting breastfeeding, bases its operations. Do you have any idea how fast the population is growing here? I mean, there is an incredible number of children in this small area.
Yes, in the Philippines, the birth rate is about 3%. But in communities like this, it would be double that, maybe 5 or 6% even.
Have you seen in this community even, which obviously is a poor community, have you seen the influx of these formula milk products?
The influx comes when they get in contact with the healthcare system. When they give birth to, let's say, their children in a hospital or in a clinic, that is where the milk companies promote their products, in the sense of giving away free samples or getting these clinics to bottle feed the babies even without the consent of the mothers. And when they come home, then they have to rely on bottle feeding their babies.
At his open-air clinic, Dr. Perez is frequently confronted with mothers who should be breastfeeding, but have been encouraged not to by the system.
Yung sinundan niya.
Marichu's baby, Jun Paulo, has become ill on his diet of milk formula. She started the formula on the advice of a doctor when she became sick herself. But now her breast milk has dried. Marichu is careful to wash the baby's bottle, but the very water she's using is probably contaminated. She has no gas or electricity and little fuel for the tiny burner she uses to boil water. She bore the baby here on the floor of the tiny one-room shanty she lives in alongside the railroad track. Her husband does not have regular work, and the cost of the formula milk is a major drain on their meagre income. So she occasionally has to borrow money to make sure the baby gets his formula. Sol Fisher is 38 years old. One of her 6 children has already died, and now her baby is sick, suffering 2nd or 3rd degree malnutrition. Her husband earns about $3 Australian a day driving a tricycle. With that sort of income, the family live in grinding poverty. A few plants grow pathetically at their front door in old formula milk tins. Now she can no longer afford even that. She feeds her baby in the permanent gloom of their tiny shack on Nestlé's condensed milk, which she assumes is the next best thing.
The infants that I see here that are sick and have diarrhea or pneumonias or respiratory tract infections are almost exclusively bottle-fed or mixed-fed to some extent. The ones who are bottle-fed, purely bottle-fed, tend to be the more severely ill and to have the more frequent cases of illnesses. Those who are mixed-fed have a lesser amount, but they still are quite more sickly than the breastfed ones.
Two years after the implementation of the strict Philippines Milk Code, not a single company had been brought to court for violations. Ironically, the government has been much tougher on community health workers. In July last year, Dr. Perez's community volunteers promoting breastfeeding in areas like this came under attack from the military. 26 Bunso community workers and their families were arrested and accused of subversive activity. They were later released due to a lack of evidence and because the military was having a hard time proving that breastfeeding was subversive. In the same year, Bunso released secret documents it had obtained from Nestlé, showing its intention to break aspects of the code. One planning document includes reference to so-called donations to health workers and hospitals. It orders discreet delivery, directly to the health worker without witnesses, preferably at the residence. Other documents show a continuing pattern of Nestlé gifts to hospitals and clinics. These include incubators, air conditioners and refrigerators. Does it ever go into the area of corruption, direct payments of money?
It's really very discreet in this case, and a few people only know about this.
You have heard of it happening?
Yes,
though?
it happened.
What sort of payments would they be?
It could be in cash or in kind. And a lot of doctors really are on this category.
So this is a secret part of the company's operations?
Yes.
But you do know about it actually happening?
Yes, definitely.
How do you know about it happening?
Well, if you talk to hospital staff, especially in the formula room, they would really tell you that somebody is paying for their salary.
You mean in some private hospitals?
Private hospitals.
So there are some private hospitals where the companies would actually pay the salary of nurses?
Yes.
And doctors as well?
Attendants. Doctors, they pay it in some kind of scholarship, or if they ask for a grand scholarship internationally, this is where the strategy comes in.
Are we talking about a lot of money here?
A lot of money, yes.
We contacted the Philippines arm of Nestlé for an interview, but they refused. In writing, they denied giving equipment to hospitals to promote infant formulas, and they denied paying the wages of any health workers. But they agreed they do sponsor scientific meetings, keep files on individual doctors, and use company funds to entertain them. They also agreed that special scholarships are given to doctors, but that the practice is legal. Meanwhile, babies are still being lined up for the formula fix and dying in large numbers. For the record, it should be stated that Nestlé Australia is a separate company, and these allegations do not cover its operations. But Nestlé Australia did export some 8,500 tonnes of infant milk formula to Asia and the Pacific last year. In the Philippines, Nestlé and many other companies continue to breach both the spirit and the letter of the international code, their own agreements, and even national laws.
Oh, Mrs. Bukang Dideng. Baba may balat mo. Yan na, sige. Huwag ka nang kiri. Baby out, baby boy. Baby out. Mrs. lalaki at anak mo.
The international community appears unable to stop corporate greed subverting the greatest miracle of them all.
Mrs. tingnan mo yung baby mo, ha? Lalaki, ha? Pakita mo.
Yet all along, the solution has been so terribly simple.
Tony Jones presented that report. I only hope we're not back in another 15 years doing the whole sorry story all over again. A slightly brighter note to close on. You'll be pleased to know that our near neighbour Papua New Guinea has had considerable success in frustrating the artificial milk manufacturers by the simple expedient of making feeding bottles and teats only available on prescription. Incidentally, this is Breastfeeding Awareness Month here in Australia. Time to go, but it would be remiss of me not to mention that reporter Marion Wilkinson has won television journalism's highest award for her devastating piece on the Liberal leadership coup. And Paul Barry was highly commended for his report on the Bond Empire. Four Corners cameraman Dave McGuire also picked up a Walkley for his fine film work on Inundation of a Nation, the catastrophic flood in Bangladesh. Your award-winning team will be back next Monday night at 8:30. See you then. Good night.